I think we've just kind of gone along with the story and believed everything that they've told us in trust. And when you get underneath all of the conventional medicine, you realize there is no proof of anything and everything has been falsified.
What's beyond our reality? Is there a different world waiting for our discovery? Are you open to the disruption that comes with change? This can only be done by embracing your fears, challenging your beliefs, questioning your reality, turning within for real change. This is where we join science, metaphysics, spirituality, and life experiences to bring about true healing. You can be happy. You can have peace. You can heal. This is the Self-Healing Network.
So in this video, I'm going to give you a brief introduction to German New Medicine. I'll be talking about who discovered it, how he discovered it, how it was implemented into medical practice, the results of people who were treated with its principles, as well as explain all the basic principles, which are called the 5 biological laws. So this is going to only explain the very basics. The intricacies of German New Medicine go really deep, and it takes hours and hours of study to learn the ins and outs of it and how it works. So, however, the information that I'm going to share is extremely fascinating because it makes sense on the deepest levels. It explains how almost every disease or sickness in our body, how it happens, why it happens, and it proves why scientifically. So I think that's the most important thing, is when we have scientific evidence to back up the reasonings behind these things. So if you're ready, let's get to it. So just for a little background on the man who discovered German New Medicine, who I feel personally should have a Nobel Prize for his work. He's a real genius. His name was Reich Gerd Hammer, and I hope that I'm pronouncing that correctly, but he was born in Germany in 1935. Fast forward to about 1961, when he was 26, he graduated medical school. He had also studied physics, theology, and more, but he became a specialist in internal medicine. He worked at the Department of Internal Medicine at the University of Tübingen, I don't know if I'm saying that right, and Heidelberg, where he dealt with cancer patients on a regular basis. He went on to marry a medical practitioner, and they had 4 children together. And then they also ran a private medical practice together. So Dr. Hammer invented and patented many medical tools, like a scalpel that cuts 20 times sharper than a razor blade, which came to be known as the Hammer scalpel, as well as a new saw for plastic surgery. And the money that he made from these inventions allowed him and his family to move to Italy, where he offered free medical treatment in the slums of Rome. So he really was out to help people. So fast forward 1978, he had a son named Dirk, who was 17 at the time, and his son was accidentally shot, and he died a few months later in the arms of Dr. Hammer. And then a few months after that, after the death of his son Dirk, Dr. Hammer was diagnosed with a testicular tumor, and he was treated with it with surgery, but he almost died. And this is when Dr. Hammer started to question things and investigate further. He didn't have a history of cancer in his family, so getting this tumor didn't make sense to him. It occurred to him that this disease could possibly be related to the loss of his son. So he started to inquire whether all of his patients in the Munich Cancer Hospital had also experienced tragedy before they got sick. And he discovered that yes, without exception, all of his patients had admitted to a drastically shocking event occurring prior to their cancer. So he began to share this news with his colleagues, but they weren't as accepting to it as he was. And he was eventually told by hospital management to either leave the hospital or renounce his thesis. But he didn't want to give in, so he left the clinic. It was then that he formulated the first biological law of nature, which is the iron rule of cancer. Up until this point, Dr. Hammer had a wonderful career. He was celebrated as the youngest patent-holding internist in Germany, And it was only with his discovery of the psychic correlation to illnesses that this all turned around. In 1986, his physician's license was revoked for not denouncing his discoveries and converting back to conventional medicine. He also experienced 2 imprisonments and 3 assassination attempts. So this just shows you that Dr. Hammer was on to something, and he was a threat to a system that had a goal that wasn't in line with getting people healthy. If they really wanted to help people, why didn't they accept Hammer's discoveries? Why didn't they look deeper? We have seen this time and time again. If you look at the many people who have treated cancer successfully in an unconventional way or come up with alternative treatments, these people have been threatened, ostracized, discredited, had their medical licenses revoked, etc. And that's when you know you're really onto something important, I believe. So Dr. Hammer once again presented his findings to the University of Tübingen for review, and he was rejected. An in-house counsel had whispered to him, and this is what he said. He said, "Our masters have analyzed it hundreds of times behind closed doors, and every time they found that everything is correct. If they had only found one case that would not have been correct, they would have invited you for public scrutiny the next day." So basically, he was admitting that everything about Dr. Hammer's work was accurate and that they couldn't find any flaws, and that's why he was being rejected. His success rate with treating these people with cancer was, it's not in the interest of making money. So anyways, he ended up dying on July 2nd, in 2017, and he was in exile in Norway. The 5 biological laws of nature that Dr. Hammer discovered describe the causes and progression of almost all diseases. They don't apply to injuries such as accidents, poisonings due to things like mercury, fluorine, etc., and deficiencies like those that are caused by an unhealthy diet or one that causes like glyphosate poisoning. But any natural disease that his biological laws can explain. So let's get into the 5 biological laws. I'm going to give you a brief overview on all of these. But first, let me explain what a significant biological special program is. It's also known as an SBS. So this is important to understand because it's the foundation of Dr. Hammer's work. A significant biological special program, or SBS, is a shocking event that happens that causes a biological conflict, or what we will call a conflict from here on out. This affects 3 areas instantly: the psyche, the brain, and an organ, or multiple organs. There are many different types of conflicts that affect different parts of the brain and different organs, which is based on human development, called embryology. So we know from embryology that each cell in the body is assigned to one of the 3 germ layers. And these 3 germ layers are related to different parts of the brain. The brainstem and midbrain correspond to the endoderm, the cerebellum and cerebral white matter correspond to the mesoderm, and the cerebral cortex corresponds to the ectoderm. So I know you probably won't remember any of this. I don't have it all straight myself, but there's plenty of references that we can access to figure out what corresponds to what. So the death of Dr. Hammer's son, Dirk, is an example of a conflict. Conflict is also known as a DHS, or a Dirk-Hammer syndrome. He named it after his son. So for the psyche during a conflict, there will be compulsive thinking. Your thoughts are constantly focused on one thing, the conflict. The person can think of nothing else, even at night. In the brain, there's a sharp-edged Hammer focus appear in the corresponding brain section. So Dr. Hammer did extensive research, and he observed CT scans of all of his patients. And what he saw were white rings in areas of the brain that correspond to the conflict, as well as the organ that's involved. If the ring has a sharp edge, the conflict is active. And if the edge of the circle is blurry or fuzzy, it means the conflict has been resolved and that the person is healing. So this is consistent in each and every patient he observed, without exception. They had a corresponding Hammer focus in the part of the brain that relates to where their issue was in the body. So getting back to the biological laws, let's start with number one. The first biological law of nature is called the conflict, and there are three criteria. Number one, each SBS is formed by a biological conflict, which is defined as an acute, dramatic, and isolation conflict shock experience on three levels: the psyche, the brain, and the organ. And notice how it's a biological conflict, meaning it's not psychological. It's a natural survival instinct by the body. So something that is done by the body to ensure our survival on the highest level. The second criterion is that the biological conflict is determined at the moment of the conflict in two areas: the localization of the Hammer focus observed in the brain and the localization in the organ as a cancer or a cancer equivalent. The third criterion is that the course of the SBS at all three levels, psyche, brain, and organ, is synchronous, meaning it happens all at the same time in all three areas, from conflict to conflict resolution, onto the healing crisis at the height of the healing process, and then the return to normalization, which is also called normatonia. So here's a great summary that comes from the book, The Psychic Roots of Disease. It states, diseases, quote unquote, begin with events or situations that we haven't resolved and are mirrored on three levels of psyche, brain, organ. Small disharmonies cause minor diseases, and great shocks cause major diseases. So that's a good description of the first biological law, and explains how everything starts on a biological level. The second biological law of nature is called the two-phased process. There are two main phases of a conflict shock: the conflict active phase and the repair phase. During the active phase, one is very stressed. They're constantly thinking about the conflict. They have increased blood pressure, increased pulse rate, faster breathing, poor sleep, feeling wound up, no appetite, weight loss, etc. So you could see how this is a very stressful time for the body. You can think of nothing else but what happened. This is when the sympathetic nervous system is working pretty much nonstop. And the reason it does this is that your full attention is needed in order to help you resolve the situation. So it's working overtime so that it's in the forefront of your attention, and all of your energy is going into trying to find a solution. So it's doing this to get your attention and saying, hey, look at me, solve this issue before it manifests into something, really disastrous. Excuse me. The second phase is the repair phase. So this means that the person has resolved the active conflict and the healing can begin. The parasympathetic nervous system now takes over, which can result in constant fatigue. So you're healing. All of your energy is going into repairing your body. Plus, you just spent all of that energy during the active phase. You're going to be tired. This phase can include relaxation, the end of compulsive thinking, emotional relief, warm hands, poor circulation, poor performance, need for sleep, large appetite, headache, fever. And at this time, the Hammer focus will show soft contours due to fluid retention. So in the first part of the repair phase, water is deposited in the affected brain section and organ, which is called edema, which can result in pain. And if a person cannot resolve a conflict, it's possible that they become weaker and weaker until they die of exhaustion, called cachexia. So, it is important to resolve these conflicts, because it can have obviously bad outcomes. So right in the middle of the repair phase, there's a repair phase crisis that occurs. This is a short but intense duration of symptoms that determine whether we'll make it over the hump or not. It can last from a few minutes to about 3 days, and it's the most critical phase of the SBS. Some of the most serious healing crises are heart attacks and seizures, and this happens during that intense phase. During the crisis phase, one may experience chills and may experience the conflict again in slow motion. After making it over the crisis hump, the second part of the repair phase kicks in, and one will start to eliminate all the water that accumulated during that first phase. So there'll be a lot of peeing, and just a lot of water elimination. Each SPS comes with its own set of repair phase symptoms, and experiences will vary depending on the conflict. Moving on to number 3. The third biological law of nature is the ontogenetic system of diseases, or the germ layer order. So I kind of explained this briefly earlier, but I'll explain a bit more. This law states that all bodily processes can be understood and explained through an organism's developmental history. Using embryology, we can understand that each tissue, each cell in humans and animals is assigned to one of 3 germ layers. Dr. Hammer studied around 10,000 patients to solve the puzzle of why the processes that occurred during the conflict and repair phases were not always consistent and seemed to be a bit illogical. However, he discovered some amazing things that put all of the pieces of the puzzle together. Here's what he observed that seemed to act in an unpredictable manner. He observed that some tumors would grow in the conflict active phase and shrink in the repair phase. Then sometimes cancers would form holes, which means tissue shrinkage, during the conflict active phase, and then fill up again during the repair phase. So they were opposite in some cases, and he couldn't figure out why. But what he discovered was that depending on the germ layer, the conflict theme and part of the brain was involved would determine how the cancer and the tumor would behave. The endoderm and old mesoderm tissues behave in the same way, which is the way of the old brain, meaning that the cells will proliferate or grow during the conflict active phase and then normalize during the healing phase. So the new mesoderm and the ectoderm germ layer tissues will do the opposite. There will be cell degradation during the conflict active phase and then cell growth to repair during the healing phase. So it is 100% untrue that a cancer will proliferate or get bigger and bigger and bigger until the person is doomed. It is not a senseless process carried out by rampaging cells, but a biological process put into place perfectly to help us deal with healing conflicts. All right, moving on to number 4. The 4th biological law of nature is the ontogenetic system of microbes. Ooh, interesting. This law states that fungi, bacteria, and viruses, which are nucleic acid protein compounds, are indispensable aids and fulfill defined tasks. So basically, conventional medicine has blamed so-called bad microbes on the cause of diseases because they have been found in the body at the time. But that's because they're always found in the body. Having a good or bad immune system has always been blamed for why some healthy people have these microbes in the body and are not sick, while others do get sick and have these microbes in the body. So infection experiments have been carried out in secret time and time again and have always brought back the same result. Germs can be partially transferred, but the diseases cannot. Microbes are known as the firefighters because they are called to the scene of the fire, which is the disease, and help put it out. So firefighters are not blamed for the fires, right? Our bodies are riddled with microbes. In fact, nothing in nature is germ-free. Dr. Hammer discovered that the 3 microbial species, fungi, bacteria, and viruses, are controlled by different brain regions. And I say viruses because, we've never isolated a virus, proven they've existed. So whatever they're considering a virus, we're calling viruses. So they're all controlled by different brain regions. They get their orders from the brain and they work exclusively during the repair phases. Fungi and bacteria are controlled by the brainstem, and they clear away excess tissue from the inner germ layer. Night sweats are a sign that they're at work. The brainstem tells them to multiply in the active phase. So if they are found in this asymptomatic active phase, conventional medicine calls them non-pathogenic bacteria. And there are many types of bacteria, and each has a special field. Part of them is controlled by the cerebellum and destroys tissues, and another part is controlled by the cerebral white matter and builds tissues. So let's talk about viruses now. There is no direct evidence that viruses cause diseases. All of the evidence from conventional medicine is based on indirect tests based on the binding or non-binding of proteins to other proteins. These tests are not calibrated because this would mean that you would have to have an isolated virus, and no virus has ever been isolated. Many of what we call epidemics can be attributed to people's perceptions of events being similar and producing the same conflict shocks, leading to similar diseases. Similar stress of negatively experienced emotions lead to similar diseases in the repair phase. So finally, the fifth biological law, which is the biological reason for diseases. Dr. Hammer called diseases significant biological special programs, or SBS, which explains that each disease is biological in nature and has a significant meaning. Conventional medicine's explanation of diseases leaves us feeling like a powerless victim, subject to chance or by invasion of some outside invader that seeks to harm us. German New Medicine explains, and I believe proves to us, that we are not victims at all, that our bodies are perfect and always striving towards perfect health and balance. We can see that almost everything we experience in the form of disease or sickness is our body working towards getting us back to normality. We just have to move out of the way. So like I said, this is a very brief introductory to German New Medicine. So I really hope I did a good job of explaining the basics of, how it works and the 5 biological laws. Perhaps this paints a clearer picture of how our bodies are designed to work, and that it may be possible for us to live our lives in peace instead of fear, in knowledge instead of victimhood, and have a long life lived in good health and happiness. And I truly believe that German New Medicine is what all of us are looking for, that are looking for security and knowledge in our own health and how our body works. And those of us that are open to new possibilities, because this is against everything conventional medicine teaches us and talks about. But I believe Dr. Hammer did a better job of proving the German New Medicine than conventional medicine has ever proven our current system. I think we've just kind of gone along with the story and believed everything that they've told us in trust. And when you get underneath all of the conventional medicine, you realize there is no proof of anything, and everything has been falsified, as far as bacteria and germs and viruses, and it's all been falsified in order to support a narrative that only helps certain people. And unfortunately, it helps certain people make a lot of money and stay in control. So I'm not going to get into that. But anyways, I hope I did a good job at explaining German New Medicine. I am not at all, completely familiar with every little aspect of German New Medicine. But if you do have any questions, I will be happy to help answer them. I am constantly studying and reading more and trying to learn everything I can about German New Medicine, because I think it's very important. It's very important for me. It's very important for me and my family. And I believe it's very important for humanity in the place that we are right now in the world and how everything is progressing and evolving. I think that German New Medicine is perfect for that. So anyways, have a great day, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.
If you enjoy this type of content and would like to see more, please like and subscribe to be notified when I upload new videos. You can read more about EFT, join my healing community, or schedule a private session by visiting my website at roothealings.com.